Happy Monday, we're back with yet another bit of Total War Warhammer 3 news. Today we have the Khorne faction mechanics, and yes, they are going to be pretty much exactly what you were expecting. First up, we obviously have skulls and the Skull Throne. Now, skulls are used in the faction as a currency to spend on various things, similar to the way the Siege factions use grimoires. You generate skulls in just about everything you do, such as battles, sieges, post-battle decisions, dilemmas, buildings, and more. Skull piles can even be formed when two armies fight when Khorne isn't even involved or nearby, meaning you can collect more skulls by simply waiting for other factions to battle amongst themselves. Skulls are used for a few things, but the most obvious is the Skull Throne. You must keep the Skull Throne stocked with plenty of fresh skulls, and in return you will gain buffs to post-battle loot and movement range after raising settlements, similar to Torroks. If you do wish to occupy settlement, this will also cost you a significant amount of skulls, because it wouldn't be a Khornate settlement without the proper decoration. Due to this, sacking and raising are the preferred options for the Khorne faction the majority of the time. That being said, just because you burn a settlement to the ground, that doesn't mean it's of no use to you. Our next mechanic is the Blood Calls. When a Khorne army defeats a settlement in battle, there are two options when it comes to raising. Skulls for the Skull Throne generates 1,000 skulls for your faction, whereas Blood for the Blood God grants massive replenishment and also summons a Blood Host army nearby, similar to the old War mechanic, but this time, you're in control. This army cannot replenish or recruit, but aside from that, it can be used exactly like any other army in your faction. The power of these armies scales with how many you've created in your campaign, and the size of the armies can be increased through various other means. This army also has the capability to go and defeat another settlement and spawn more Blood Host armies, meaning this can snowball very quickly, especially when you consider they spawn with full movement range, meaning you can fight many times per turn and spawn multiple armies as long as you keep winning. Of course, as the campaign goes on, these armies will eventually become weak and perish, but the skulls generated from their demise lessens that blow somewhat. To add to this, Khorne faction also has the power of passive colonization, referred to later as drawn to destruction. This means if you have a settlement in a province and other settlements are raised, over time those settlements will become colonized at no cost and be given to you for free. This means you are encouraged to obliterate provinces, take one settlement for your own, and then allow the others to come around all by themselves. You can quite literally have your cake and eat it too, or in this case, raise your settlement and occupy it anyway. Our next mechanic is a smaller one, Bloodletting. This is basically the fightiness meter that the Greenskins used to have, but on a faction-wide scale. Should you stop battling for too long, your faction will suffer with reduced replenishment and growth faction-wide, as well as army debuffs. However, the opposite will increase this alongside global recruitment and more. Basically, you want to have as many armies as possible, creating as much destruction as possible, and everyone will be happy. Aside from those that you're fighting. Can't imagine they'd be very pleased. Of course, Khorne factions also have the Unholy manifestations and cults, just like Siege and the other Chaos factions. These are basically the new mechanics for corruption as we learned earlier. The tiers of manifestations for Khorne are Eternal War, which is unlocked from the start, and it spawns a small Khorne army to attack your own army, which of course grants an increase to Bloodletting, as well as you gaining skulls, favour, and XP from battle. I believe favour is going to be the name of currency for the Khorne faction. Call of Battle requires 1,000 corruption globally, and gives an army 50% movement range. Slaughter Incarnate requires 2,000 corruption, and doubles an army's skull gain from battles for several turns. And finally, Khorne's Glare requires 3,000 corruptions and disables a friendly army's movement for several turns, but at the end of this it raises the local settlement and grants a massive amount of skulls. Of course, if Khorne is winning the great game and has the majority of corruption worldwide, these effects will only get stronger. Of course, Khorne can also utilise cults, and his 4 building choices are the Hideout, which generates some skulls per turn, the Fighting Pit, which gives bonus skulls for every battle fought in the province, not just by you, the Lodge, which generates a large amount of skulls per turn if a lord of any faction is present, and finally the Arena, which destroys the cult when completed, but teleports your faction leader and their army to that settlement. Anyone else getting the feeling that Chaos is going to be a massive pain in the ass to take out, and also extremely excited about that fact? Anyway, we finally get to the tech tree. Khorne's tech tree is for some reason based around the number 8. He has several pillars or areas of research which each have 8 techs in them. This allows you to jump quickly between the pillars. Now, obviously, a lot of the techs are based around fighting, with one pillar having 8 techs focused on fighting the 8 specific factions, assuming the 8 specific factions that the game is launching with. The rest are a mix of techs for making units better, cheaper, faster to recruit, and so on. There are also a few techs to buff the blood hosts and increase the chances of colonization via drawn to destruction, which I think I might be rushing once I get into the game. The majority of the techs also cost skulls to research, so you have to keep battling or your research will come to a standstill. That being said, it is Khorne, so not battling wasn't ever really on the agenda. Now, this isn't a mechanic, but there is an interesting note at the bottom of this blog post. Since Khorne is, well, Khorne, his factions aren't really liked much by pretty much anyone. Anytime a demonic faction that isn't Slaanesh meets a non-demonic faction, war is automatically declared. Of course, Skaven are insane enough, so are willing to be friends, and then of course Norsca and the Warriors of Chaos are servants to Chaos, so are more willing to buddy up with you. Aside from that, it's basically this is Total War, the faction, when playing as any of the other Chaos factions, apart from Slaanesh, which we'll learn about later. And particularly Khorne, who suffers massive diplomatic penalties with pretty much everyone due to all the warring and skull harvesting. Even other Khorne factions hate you, since Scarbrand did try to take down the big guy himself that one time, so don't expect to make any friends. And that just about wraps up everything about the Khorne faction mechanics in Warhammer 3. Let me know in the comments below what you think about these new mechanics. I personally think they fit perfectly with the Khorne mentality, and they're going to be a totally chaotic experience. Pun absolutely intended. Like the video if you did, and if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Check out COLONELDAMNEDERS.store for all sorts of cool designs on a variety of products such as hoodies, t-shirts, posters and more. You can support the channel, and you can also grab yourself something nice. I'd like to thank all supporters of the channel on YouTube memberships, Patreon, and on Twitch. In particular, it's your boy LC for their wonderful support out in the Unclean Ones tier. One more thank you for watching, and for now, I've been Colonel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.